This monkey should be serving bananas, not wine. Wellington's French sliced through Le Bernardin's refined atmosphere. The hotel CEO leaned back in his leather chair, gesturing at Jasmine like she was livestock at auction. He deliberately knocked his wine glass towards the edge. Red liquid splashed across the pristine white tablecloth, across Jasmine's uniform. "Clean it up, girl," Wellington barked in English, then switched back to French. "At least she's useful for something, although I doubt she can even spell sophisticated." Claude Moreau and Philippe Dubois shifted uncomfortably as other diners turned to stare. The elegant dining room fell silent except for the soft drip of wine hitting marble. Jasmine stood perfectly still, burgundy staining her sleeve. Her dark eyes never leave Wellington's face. Then she smiled. "Monsieur Wellington," she replied in flawless Parisian French, "your vocabulary is as primitive as your manners. Have you ever assumed someone couldn't understand you, only to discover they understood everything?" The wine glass froze halfway to Wellington's lips. Claude Moreau's fork clattered against his plate. Philippe Dubois leaned forward, eyes wide with shock. Around them, other diners had stopped eating entirely. Wellington's face flushed red. "What did you just say?" "I said your vocabulary needs improvement," Jasmine repeated calmly, switching to English. "Also, comparing people to animals went out of style around 1860. You might want to update your material." The French businessmen exchanged meaningful glances. In rapid French, Claude whispered to Philippe, "Did she just correct his pronunciation?" Jasmine finished in perfect French. "Yes, he said sophistiqué wrong. It's not that difficult." Wellington's jaw dropped. Behind him, a woman at table 12 pulled out her phone, clearly recording. The soft murmur of conversation had completely died. "This is impossible," Wellington stammered. You're just a waitress who speaks 7 languages?" Jasmine's voice remained steady. French, Italian, Spanish, Mandarin, German, Portuguese, and English. "Would you like me to insult you in any of those, or should I stick to French since you seem to struggle with it?" From the kitchen doorway, a tall figure emerged. Chef Antoine Dubois had been listening to every word. His sharp eyes took in the spilled wine, Jasmine's stained uniform, and Wellington's shocked expression. "Mademoiselle," the chef said in rapid Italian, "where did you learn to speak like this?" Without missing a beat, Jasmine replied in flowing Italian, "University, chef." Before life happened. A server dropped a tray in the kitchen. The crash echoed through the silent dining room like an exclamation point. Wellington found his voice, but it came out as a croak. This has to be some kind of setup." Chef Dubois stepped closer to the table. His presence commanded respect. 30 years of Michelin stars had that effect. "Monsieur Wellington," he said quietly, "I think you've misunderstood something fundamental about the people who serve you." The chef's eyes never left Jasmine's face. In those eyes was recognition, respect, and something else. Opportunity. Chef Dubois switched to rapid Mandarin. "Tell me about your education." Jasmine's response flowed like water. Her pronunciation was flawless, her tone respectful but confident. She spoke of linguistics, of cultural bridges built through language, of dreams deferred but not forgotten. Wellington's face cycled through confusion, anger, and something approaching panic. His French business partners were now staring at Jasmine with undisguised fascination. "Impossible," Wellington muttered. "This is some kind of trick." "No trick," Claude Moreau said quietly in English, his own French accent thick with emotion. "That was beautiful Mandarin. My wife is Chinese. I recognize perfection when I hear it." The dining room had transformed into an amphitheater. Servers stood frozen with plates in their hands. Kitchen staff peered through the service window. Even the sommelier had emerged from the wine cellar. Chef Dubois smiled for the first time all evening. Portuguese? Jasmine's response was musical, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. She described the poetry of Pessoa, the rhythm of Brazilian samba, the melancholy of fado. At table 15, an elderly Portuguese gentleman began to weep quietly. German, the chef continued. This time Jasmine's tone grew academic, precise. She quoted Goethe, discussed the philosophy of language, the weight of words in shaping thought. Wellington slammed his hand on the table. Wine glasses jumped. Enough! This is ridiculous. You're a waitress. Waitresses don't speak 7 languages. Jasmine's voice cut through his protest like silk over steel. You're right, most don't. Most. But then again, most CEOs don't struggle with basic French grammar either. The French businessmen couldn't suppress their laughter. Philippe Dubois actually applauded. Your pronunciation of sophistiqué was particularly painful, Jasmine continued. Also, when you called me a monkey earlier, you used the masculine form. Even your insults lack precision. Wellington's face had gone from red to purple. I demand to speak to the manager. This is unacceptable. A waitress humiliating customers. The customer humiliated himself, said a clear voice from table 9. All eyes turned to an elegant Asian woman in her 30s. She set down her wine glass with deliberate care. I'm Sarah Lane from Metropolitan Dining Review. I've been watching this entire exchange. Wellington's color drained instantly. Metropolitan Dining Review could make or break restaurants with a single article. Sarah Lane continued. In 20 years of restaurant criticism, I've never witnessed such a display of linguistic mastery. Or such appalling behavior from a patron. She stood, walking slowly toward their table. Miss Carter. Jasmine Carter. Miss Carter, you just demonstrated more cultural sophistication in 5 minutes than most people manage in a lifetime. Sarah's voice carried across the now silent restaurant. Where did you study? Columbia, PhD program in applied linguistics. Jasmine's voice grew quieter. Before circumstances changed. The weight of that statement settled over the dining room like snow. Dreams abandoned, potential buried under necessity. A brilliant mind hidden behind a name tag and uniform. Chef Dubois stepped forward. His voice was gentle but firm. Mademoiselle Carter, we need to talk. Wellington struggled to his feet. This is absurd. I won't be lectured by the help. Do you know who I am? A man who judges books by their covers, Jasmine replied, and apparently struggles with basic literacy in multiple languages. The Portuguese gentleman at table 15 stood slowly, his voice shaking with emotion. Young lady, you're Portuguese. It reminded me of my late wife. She taught literature at the University of Lisbon. He wiped his eyes. Thank you for giving me her voice back, even for a moment. Wellington looked around the room desperately. Every face stared back with a mixture of awe, respect, and barely concealed disgust. Not for Jasmine, but for him. This isn't over, he hissed. Chef Dubois moved closer to Jasmine, his voice low but carrying in the stillness. Mademoiselle, I have a proposition for you. The dining room held its breath. The grandfather clock in Le Bernardin's corner chimed 9 times. Jasmine's shift should have ended an hour ago, but here she stood, surrounded by strangers who suddenly saw her as more than invisible hands refilling water glasses. 2 years ago, she began softly, her voice carrying across the hushed dining room. I was defending my dissertation on language as cultural diplomacy at Columbia University. Her fingers unconsciously touched the worn French dictionary hidden in her apron pocket, her grandmother's final gift before the stroke took her words away. My advisor called my research revolutionary, said I had a once-in-a-generation gift for building bridges between cultures. A bitter smile crossed her lips. Turns out bridges don't pay medical bills. Wellington shifted uncomfortably, but Jasmine continued, her voice growing stronger. My father collapsed during my oral defense. Massive heart attack. The medical bills. She paused, steadying herself. Someone had to choose between dreams and family. That someone was me. The Portuguese gentleman dabbed his eyes with his napkin. Sarah Lane took notes discreetly, her expression soft with understanding. I work 3 jobs now. Breakfast shift at a diner in Queens, lunch at a corporate cafeteria. Evenings here. Jasmine's voice never wavered. Every dollar goes to keeping my father alive and my younger brother in college at Howard. Chef Dubois listened intently. He recognized the weight of sacrifice. His own journey from Lyon to Manhattan had demanded similar choices. Marcus, my brother, he's studying international business. I want to work for the State Department someday. Pride flickered in Jasmine's eyes. He doesn't know I dropped out. Thinks I'm taking a gap year to explore my options. Wellington opened his mouth to speak, but Claude Moreau's sharp look silenced him. The languages keep me sane, Jasmine continued. Each one is a door to somewhere else. When I'm conjugating verbs in Portuguese or discussing philosophy in German, I'm not just a waitress. I'm still me. She looked directly at Wellington. That's what you couldn't see, monsieur. You saw a uniform and assumed you knew everything about the person wearing it. The dining room remained silent. Every person present understood they were witnessing something profound, a moment when the invisible became visible. Chef Dubois stepped closer. Mademoiselle Carter, what if I told you those doors don't have to stay closed? Before Chef Dubois could elaborate, Claude Moreau cleared his throat. His eyes sparkled with sudden inspiration. Mademoiselle Carter, he said in French, my colleague and I have a proposition. We're finalizing a complex merger between French and American hospitality companies. The legal terminology is challenging. Philippe Dubois nodded eagerly. Our translator canceled at the last minute. Food poisoning. We have documents that need review tonight. The contracts must be signed by midnight or we lose the deal. Wellington's face darkened. Absolutely not. She's a waitress, not a legal translator. This is getting ridiculous. Let her try, Sarah Lane interjected, her pen poised over her notebook. What's the harm? Wellington slammed his fist on the table. The harm? I'm trying to protect these gentlemen from embarrassing themselves. You can't just promote the help because she knows a few party tricks. Jasmine felt the familiar weight of doubt creeping in. These were multi-million-dollar documents. One mistake could destroy companies, ruin lives. Who was she to think she could handle such responsibility? But then she remembered Marcus's voice on the phone yesterday. Sis, you always told me I could be anything. Don't you believe the same about yourself? Show me the documents, she said quietly. Claude Moreau pulled out his briefcase, extracting thick legal folders. The contracts were dense with technical language merger clauses, liability terms, cultural compliance requirements that most translators would struggle with. Wellington leaned back, arms crossed. This is going to be a disaster. Don't say I didn't warn you. Other diners had quietly moved closer, forming an impromptu audience. The Portuguese gentleman pulled up a chair. Sarah Lane activated her phone's recording function. Jasmine opened the first document. Her eyes scanned rapidly, processing complex legal French. She began to speak, her voice clear and confident. Article 7 addresses intellectual property transfers, but there's a cultural nuance missing. In French business law, patrimoine doesn't just mean assets, it carries emotional weight, family legacy. The American translation misses this entirely. Claude Moreau's eyebrows shot up. Exactly. That's been our main sticking point. She continued, flipping pages with growing confidence. The liability clause here uses responsabilité solidaire, that's joint and several liability. but the way it's written in English could create unexpected tax implications under New York state law. Philippe Dubois leaned forward. We've been arguing about that exact point for weeks. Wellington's jaw tightened. Lucky guesses. Jasmine ignored him, diving deeper into the documents. She explained cultural business practices, clarified ambiguous phrases, and identified 3 potential legal pitfalls that could have cost millions. As she worked, other restaurant staff gathered at the edges of the dining room. Servers, kitchen staff, even the dishwashers had emerged to witness this transformation. The termination clause needs restructuring, Jasmine continued. French law requires specific language about workforce protection that's completely absent from the English version. By the time she finished, 45 minutes had passed. The French businessmen sat in stunned silence. Mademoiselle, Claude Moreau said slowly, you just identified every issue our legal team has been debating for 3 months. Wellington's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is impossible. She's making it up. She's making... Philippe Dubois pulled out his business card, sliding it across the table to Jasmine. We could use someone like you. Full-time. 6-figure salary. The dining room erupted in whispered conversations. Jasmine stared at the card, her hands trembling slightly. But Wellington wasn't finished. Absolutely not. Wellington's voice cut through the excited murmur like a blade. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. This charade ends now. He turned to Chef Dubois with barely controlled fury. Antoine, I've been dining here for 15 years. My company books corporate events here monthly. Do you really want to throw that away for some waitress playing dress-up? The chef's expression remained neutral, but tension rippled through his shoulders. Wellington pressed his advantage. I'll be very clear. If this person isn't removed from my section immediately, Wellington International will cancel our spring gala. That's 300 guests. $50,000 in revenue. Jasmine felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling on her chest. Rent was due Monday. Her father's medication cost $800 a week. Marcus's tuition payment was coming up. The restaurant manager, David Kim, appeared suddenly beside Chef Dubois. His face was pale with worry. Chef, perhaps we should discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, Wellington continued, his voice growing louder. Service staff have roles. They serve. They don't pretend to be consultants or translators or whatever fantasy this has become. He gestured dismissively at the French businessmen. Gentlemen, you're being manipulated. This is clearly some kind of setup, probably for social media attention. Other wealthy diners began nodding. A woman in diamonds whispered loudly, "It is rather inappropriate." Servers should know their place. An elderly man in an expensive suit grumbled, "Next thing you know, they'll all be demanding promotions just for doing their jobs." Jasmine watched the tide turning. She'd seen this before, the moment when possibility collapsed back into harsh reality, when dreams met the immovable wall of social expectations. Manager Kim cleared his throat nervously. "Miss Carter, perhaps you should return to your other tables." "Perhaps she should return to whatever neighborhood she came from," Wellington added viciously, "before she gets ideas above her station." The words hit like physical blows. Jasmine's grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Some people will try to make you small, ma petite. Don't let them steal your words." But her words felt heavy now, weighted with consequences. One wrong move, and she'd lose everything. Chef Dubois remained silent, his eyes moving between Wellington, his manager, and Jasmine. The weight of business calculations crossed his features. Sarah Lane spoke up from her table. "This is fascinating behavior to witness in public." Wellington spun toward her. "This is a private business discussion, not some spectacle for your little food blog." Metropolitan Dining Review isn't a little food blog, Sarah replied coolly. We reach 2 million readers monthly. I'm particularly interested in stories about workplace dynamics and social justice. Wellington's confidence flickered for just a moment. But the damage was spreading. Other servers had begun to back away, fear creeping into their eyes. If the restaurant lost Wellington's business, there could be layoffs. Everyone knew the industry was brutal. Jasmine felt the familiar crushing weight of being responsible for others' livelihoods. Her talent, her voice, her worth, all secondary to survival. The Portuguese gentleman stood slowly. In my country, we have a saying, Quem tem boca, vai a Roma. Those with a voice can go anywhere. This young lady has many voices. But Wellington was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling other restaurant owners. They need to know about this situation before it spreads. Jasmine touched the dictionary in her pocket one last time. Then the kitchen doors burst open with a crash that made everyone jump. Chef! Chef Dubois. A young server burst through the kitchen doors, her face flushed with panic. We have a massive problem at table 12. The server, Maria, stumbled over her words. The Rossini family, 20 people celebrating their golden wedding anniversary. They're furious. Something about the menu, but I can't understand what they want. They're speaking Italian and getting more upset by the minute. Chef Dubois frowned. Where's Giuseppe? Giuseppe was their part-time Italian translator, usually available for special events. Called in sick, food poisoning from lunch. The family is threatening to leave and they've already paid for the 7-course tasting menu. That's $4,000 walking out the door. From across the dining room, raised voices could be heard. An elderly Italian man was gesturing wildly at a server, his voice growing louder with each misunderstood exchange. Wellington seized the moment. See? This is what happens when restaurants don't stick to proper staffing protocols. Amateur hour. Manager Kim looked stricken. The Rossini celebration had been booked for months. Losing them would be a disaster, and negative reviews from a large family could devastate the restaurant's reputation. Jasmine didn't wait for permission. She walked directly to table 12, where chaos was unfolding. The elderly patriarch, Giorgio Rossini, was red-faced and gesturing at a plate of ossobuco. His wife, Elena, had tears in her eyes. 20 family members sat in uncomfortable silence. Scusi, signor Rossini, Jasmine said in fluid Italian. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. May I help? Giorgio's angry expression instantly transformed to surprise, then relief. In rapid Italian, he explained that the ossobuco was prepared incorrectly, not the traditional Milanese style his late mother had taught Elena 60 years ago. This wasn't just dinner. It was a sacred family recipe being dishonored on their most important anniversary. Jasmine listened intently, then turned to the hovering server. The issue isn't the quality, it's cultural. This dish holds a deep family meaning. It needs to be prepared exactly as Nonna Rossini would have made it in 1963. She turned back to Giorgio, switching to the regional Lombard dialect she'd studied in graduate school. His eyes widened in amazement as she asked specific questions about his mother's preparation methods, the cut of meat, the timing of the braising. Incredibile, Giorgio whispered. You speak like my mother's village. Within minutes, Jasmine had coordinated with the kitchen, explaining the precise cultural requirements to Chef Dubois. She arranged for the dish to be prepared exactly as Giorgio's mother had made it, even sourcing saffron from the specific region Elena remembered. But her work wasn't finished. At table 15, she noticed the Portuguese gentleman looking confused at his wine selection. In perfect Portuguese, she explained the differences between Portuguese and French wine traditions, helping him choose something that would complement his meal and honor his palate memories. The German couple at table 8 was struggling with dietary restrictions. Jasmine seamlessly translated their needs, explaining not just the ingredients but the cultural significance of their requests. As she moved through the dining room, something magical happened. The entire restaurant began functioning like a perfectly tuned orchestra. Communication flowed. Problems dissolved before they became crises. Cultural barriers disappeared. Wellington watched in growing horror as every table she touched became more satisfied, more engaged, more genuinely happy. Sarah Lane scribbled notes furiously, her eyes bright with journalistic excitement. When Giorgio Rossini finally tasted the corrected ossobuco, he stood and applauded. The entire table joined him. Then other diners began clapping. The sound filled Le Bernardin like thunder. "This," Giorgio announced in accented English, "is what true hospitality looks like." Chef Dubois stood in the kitchen doorway, watching everything with calculating eyes. Chef Dubois stepped forward, his commanding presence instantly quieting the applause. 30 years of Michelin-starred excellence had taught him to recognize exceptional talent when he saw it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his French accent lending gravity to every word, "what you've witnessed tonight is extraordinary." Wellington's face contorted with rage. "Antoine, don't do anything rash. Think about your business relationships." The chef ignored him completely. "In 3 decades of fine dining, I've learned that true hospitality cannot be taught. It comes from the heart, from understanding, from respect." He walked slowly toward Jasmine, who stood frozen between the Italian family and the kitchen doors. The entire restaurant held its breath. "Mademoiselle Carter," Chef Dubois continued, "you've just demonstrated something I've been searching for my entire career. Cultural hospitality. The ability to make every guest feel not just welcomed, but truly understood." Manager Kim stepped forward nervously. "Chef, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No." The chef's voice cut through any objection. "This needs to be said publicly, because what happened here tonight was public." He turned to address the full dining room. "I am promoting Miss Carter to our first ever position of cultural liaison, effective immediately. Her new salary will reflect the extraordinary value she brings to our establishment." The French businessmen began applauding. Sarah Lane's pen flew across her notepad. The Portuguese gentleman wiped tears from his eyes. Wellington's voice cracked with desperation. "This is insanity! You're destroying your reputation for a publicity stunt." "I'm building my reputation," Chef Dubois replied calmly, "by recognizing excellence regardless of where I find it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather portfolio. "Miss Carter, I'm also offering to sponsor the completion of your PhD program. Columbia University has an excellent evening program for working professionals. We'll arrange your schedule to accommodate your studies." Jasmine's hands trembled as she stared at the formal offer letter. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. I don't understand." "You turned our dining room into a United Nations tonight," the chef smiled. "You solved problems I didn't even know we had. You made our guests feel valued in ways our training manuals never taught." Giorgio Rossini stood again, his voice booming across the restaurant. "This young lady, she gave us back my mother's memory." "That is worth more than any price." The dining room erupted in agreement. Guests nodded, smiled, some dabbed at their eyes. Wellington made one final, desperate play. "Claude, Philippe, surely you see this is just political correctness run amok." The French businessmen exchanged looks of disgust. Claude Moreau spoke coldly. "Monsieur Wellington, we've seen enough of your character tonight. Our business relationship is terminated." Philippe Dubois added, "Miss Carter, our consulting offer stands. We could use someone who understands that business is built on respect, not prejudice." Chef Dubois extended his hand to Jasmine. "So, mademoiselle, will you help us revolutionize hospitality?" As she reached out to shake his hand, her grandmother's dictionary slipped from her apron pocket. It fell open to a page she'd marked years ago. The word was dignité. Dignity. Chef Dubois bent down and carefully picked up the worn dictionary. Its pages were yellowed with age, margins filled with handwritten notes in elegant script. "Your grandmother's?" he asked softly, his voice carrying the weight of understanding. Jasmine nodded, her eyes glistening. "Grand-mère Céleste. She came from Haiti when she was 16, spoke only Creole and French. This dictionary was her bridge to English, to America, to possibility." The chef handled the small book with reverence. "My own grand-père had something similar, a cookbook from Lyon. He carried it to New York in 1952 with nothing else but hope." Wellington shifted impatiently, but no one paid him any attention. The moment belonged to something deeper than business or conflict. "She used to say," Jasmine continued, her voice growing stronger, "Ma petite, your words are your wings. They can take you anywhere, but only if you're brave enough to fly." Chef Dubois opened a random page, finding a note in the margin written in fading ink. "Courage, the bridge between dream and reality." "Wise woman," he murmured. "She would be proud of how high you've flown tonight." The Portuguese gentleman, who had been listening intently, approached slowly. From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small, leather-bound book. "Señorita," he said in accented English, "my Elena. She taught Portuguese literature for 40 years at University of Lisbon. When she died last month, I brought this to America because I cannot let go." His voice cracked with emotion as he placed the book in Jasmine's hands. "Is a collection of Pessoa's poetry. Elena, she says poetry is a universal language. Tonight, when you speak Portuguese, I hear her voice again." Tears flowed freely down his weathered cheeks. "Please, you keep this." Elena would want her books to live with someone who understands the power of words to heal hearts. Jasmine clutched both books to her chest, her grandmother's dictionary, and now Elena's poetry. 2 generations of dreams passed down through the simple act of human recognition. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "It's too precious." "Exactly why you must," the old man smiled. "Precious things should go to precious people." Sarah Lane watched from her table, no longer taking notes. Some moments were too sacred to reduce to journalism. Even some of the wealthy diners who had initially supported Wellington were wiping their eyes. The fundamental humanity of the scene had stripped away pretense and prejudice. Wellington stood alone now, watching connection bloom around him while his own isolation became increasingly apparent. Chef Dubois placed a gentle hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "Your grandmother raised a remarkable woman. Elena's legacy lives on through your voice." In that moment, beneath the crystal chandeliers of Le Bernardin, 3 generations of immigrant dreams converged into one shining moment of possibility. The dining room's gentle hum was shattered by the sharp click of heels on marble. A woman in an impeccably tailored black suit approached the host station, her presence commanding immediate attention from every staff member. "Bonsoir," she said to the maitre d' in crisp Parisian French. "Table for 1, please." Chef Dubois appeared instantly, his face pale with recognition. He whispered urgently to manager Kim, who nearly dropped his clipboard. "Michelin," Kim breathed to a nearby server. "Inspector Margot Beaumont. Anonymous review. Tonight." The words rippled through the restaurant staff like electricity. Michelin inspections could elevate restaurants to legendary status or destroy careers with a single star's removal. Le Bernardin's 3-star rating hung in the balance. Inspector Beaumont was notorious throughout the culinary world. She spoke only French during inspections, had severe food allergies, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of global cuisine that could expose any weakness in a restaurant's cultural authenticity. Wellington's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. "Well, well. Looks like your little experiment will be tested by someone who actually matters." The inspector was seated at table 6, directly in Jasmine's section. The irony wasn't lost on anyone.
"I'll take over," Manager Kim whispered to Jasmine. "This is too important to risk."
"No," Chef Dubois interrupted firmly. "She stays. If we're going to revolutionize hospitality, we prove it when it matters most." Jasmine approached the table, her heart hammering against her ribs. One mistake could destroy everything: the restaurant's reputation, the chef's career, the jobs of everyone she'd come to care about. "Bonsoir, madame," she said in perfect French. "Welcome to Le Bernardin." Inspector Beaumont looked up sharply. Her steel-gray eyes assessed Jasmine with surgical precision. "Your accent. Where did you study?" "Columbia University, madam. Applied linguistics with focus on cultural communication." The inspector's eyebrow arched slightly. "Interesting. I have severe allergies to shellfish, dairy, and nightshades. Can your kitchen accommodate?" The request was a minefield. French cuisine relied heavily on butter, cream, and tomato-based sauces. Many restaurants had failed this exact test, but Jasmine had been listening to kitchen conversations for months. She knew every ingredient in every dish. "Certainement, madame. Chef Dubois trained under Joël Robuchon, who pioneered allergen-conscious haute cuisine. May I suggest the John Dory with herb crust and citrus reduction? The fish is day-boat fresh, the herbs are grown in our rooftop garden, and the reduction uses only lemon, white wine, and olive oil." Inspector Beaumont made notes in a leather journal. "And wine pairing?" "The Sancerre from Domaine Henri Bourgeois would complement beautifully. It's mineral-forward with citrus notes that won't compete with the delicate fish, and it's completely allergen-free." From across the dining room, Wellington watched with growing unease. This wasn't going according to his expectations. The inspector continued her interrogation. "Tell me about your chef's philosophy regarding cultural fusion in French cuisine." This was dangerous territory. One wrong interpretation could suggest the restaurant was abandoning its French roots for trendy fusion trends. Jasmine chose her words carefully. "Chef Dubois believes French technique is the foundation, but true hospitality requires understanding your guests' cultural contexts. He doesn't fusion cuisines, he creates bridges between them. Tonight, for example, he adjusted the traditional osso buco preparation to honor Milanese family traditions while maintaining French technical standards." The inspector's pen paused over her journal. "You observed this preparation." "I facilitated it, madame. The Rossini family's cultural requirements needed translation, not just linguistically, but culinarily." Fascinating. Inspector Beaumont closed her journal. "In 15 years of reviewing restaurants across 6 continents, I've never encountered a server who could discuss cultural culinary philosophy with such sophistication." Wellington couldn't contain himself any longer. He strode over to the table, his face flushed with desperation. "Inspector, I feel obligated to warn you that this establishment has been conducting some very irregular practices tonight. This waitress has been overstepping boundaries, confusing guests with inappropriate behavior." Inspector Beaumont's gaze could have frozen wine. "Monsieur, I don't believe we've been introduced. Robert Wellington, CEO of Wellington International Hotels. I've been dining here for 15 years, and I've never seen such unprofessional—" "Monsieur Wellington," the inspector interrupted, her voice like a cut crystal, "in my profession, we observe before we judge." This young lady has demonstrated more cultural sophistication in 10 minutes than most establishments show in months. She turned back to Jasmine. "I'm curious about something. The Portuguese gentleman earlier, I observed your interaction. You switched dialects mid-conversation? Why?" Jasmine's mind raced. This was a test within a test. He mentioned his late wife was from Lisbon, but his accent suggested northern Portugal. When he spoke of missing her, I shifted to Mirandese, a northern dialect, because grief is more authentic in the language of our childhood. The inspector stared at Jasmine for a long moment, then began writing rapidly in her journal. Wellington's desperation peaked. "This is all theater. A show for your benefit. She's probably coached. Enough. Inspector Beaumont's command silenced him instantly. She stood gracefully, addressing the entire dining room. In 30 years of restaurant criticism, I have witnessed technical excellence many times. What I've seen tonight transcends technique. She looked directly at Jasmine. Mademoiselle, you've just provided what we call l'hospitalité transcendante, hospitality that bridges cultures rather than simply serving food. The kitchen staff had gathered at the service window. Other diners sat in rapt attention. Chef Dubois, the inspector continued, your cultural liaison program represents the future of fine dining. This is hospitality education at its highest level. Wellington's face crumbled as the inspector delivered her final assessment. I'll be recommending Le Bernardin not just maintain its 3 stars, but become the model for cultural hospitality training worldwide. The dining room erupted in applause, but as the celebration reached its peak, Inspector Beaumont raised her hand for silence. However, she said, her voice cutting through the joy, I have one final test. Inspector Beaumont reached into her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder bound in leather. The entire dining room held its breath. This, she announced, is the preliminary report for the Michelin Guide's new Cultural Excellence designation. It's a category we've been developing for restaurants that transcend traditional service to create authentic cultural bridges. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. Le Bernardin will be the first restaurant in North America to receive this distinction. But the designation isn't for the establishment alone. It's for the individual who embodies this philosophy. The inspector's eyes found Jasmine's. Mademoiselle Carter, would you step forward? Jasmine's legs felt unsteady as she approached. Behind her, she could hear Wellington's labored breathing, his world crumbling with each step she took. In my report, Inspector Beaumont continued, I will recommend that you be certified as America's first official cultural hospitality ambassador. This certification will qualify you to train hospitality professionals across the country. Chef Dubois stepped forward, his eyes bright with tears of pride. Mademoiselle Carter, it would be my honor to offer you a partnership position in our restaurant group's expansion. Starting salary, $120,000 annually, plus equity in our international ventures. The Portuguese gentleman stood slowly, his voice carrying across the silent dining room. My son owns 5 restaurants in Lisbon. He needs someone exactly like you to help them welcome American tourists with dignity. Sarah Lane rose from her table, her phone in hand. I've been live streaming the past 30 minutes to my followers. 200,000 people have watched your transformation tonight. The comments are extraordinary people sharing stories of times they were underestimated, inspired by your courage. But the real magic happened when Giorgio Rossini approached with his entire family. The elderly patriarch's eyes were wet with emotion as he spoke. Signorina, you gave us more than correct ossobuco. You gave us back the feeling of being understood. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small golden pin. This was my mother's. She wore it every day she worked as a seamstress in Little Italy, saving money to bring our family to America. He pinned it carefully to Jasmine's uniform. She would say, Giorgio, when someone sees your worth, that is when you truly arrive in America. Tonight you have arrived. The French businessmen, Claude and Philippe, exchanged glances before approaching. Claude spoke first. Miss Carter, we're withdrawing our business from Wellington International permanently. Instead, we'd like to offer you a consulting contract-full cultural liaison services for our European expansion into American markets. $200,000 annually. Wellington's face had gone ashen. His business partners, his reputation, his carefully constructed world all crumbling because he couldn't see past his own prejudice. But Inspector Beaumont wasn't finished. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've witnessed tonight represents more than individual triumph. This is a systemic change in action. She gestured to the assembled crowd. Every person in this room tonight becomes an ambassador for recognizing hidden talent wherever they find it. She turned to address Wellington directly. Monsieur, your behavior tonight will be detailed in my report as an example of how not to conduct business in our interconnected world. I suspect your corporate partners will be very interested in reading about cultural insensitivity in hospitality leadership. Wellington's phone began buzzing incessantly. Word was already spreading through social media, business networks, and industry channels. His empire built on arrogance was collapsing in real time. Chef Dubois called for attention. There's one more recognition that needs to happen. He disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a custom chef's jacket. Instead of Le Bernardin, the back read Cultural Ambassador J. Carter in elegant embroidery. This jacket, he announced, represents a new position we're creating at all our restaurants. Cultural liaisons who help us serve not just food, but understanding. As Jasmine slipped on the jacket, something extraordinary happened. The entire kitchen staff emerged, forming a line behind Chef Dubois. Servers, line cooks, dishwashers, prep staff, all applauding not just her promotion, but the possibility it represented for them all. Maria, the server who had panicked about the Italian family, stepped forward with tears streaming down her face. You showed us that our stories matter, that we're more than just our uniforms. The applause grew thunderous. Guests stood, staff celebrated, and even the hostess wiped tears from her eyes. Inspector Beaumont made one final announcement. The Culinary Institute of America has agreed to develop a cultural hospitality program based on tonight's demonstration. Miss Carter will be the lead instructor. Sarah Lane's phone chimed with notifications. The video has gone viral. 3 million views and climbing. Number sign Cultural Hospitality is trending worldwide. Wellington stood alone now, his isolation complete. His business partners had distanced themselves. His reputation was destroyed, and the woman he had tried to humiliate was being celebrated globally. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Jasmine reached into her apron and pulled out her grandmother's worn dictionary and Elena's poetry book. She held them high for everyone to see. These books, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the dining room, represent every immigrant, every person who crossed oceans carrying nothing but dreams and determination. Tonight isn't just about me. It's about every grandmother who saved her pennies to buy dictionaries, every family who sacrificed so their children could have better opportunities. She looked directly at Wellington. And it's about learning that a person's worth isn't determined by their current circumstances, but by the content of their character and the depth of their dreams. The dining room fell silent, absorbing the profound truth of her words. Inspector Beaumont closed her leather journal with finality. This concludes the most remarkable restaurant evaluation of my career. Le Bernardin doesn't just serve exceptional food, it creates exceptional moments of human connection. As the evening wound down, Wellington sat alone at his table, surrounded by empty chairs where his business partners once sat. His phone showed 17 missed calls from his board of directors. Across the room, Jasmine was surrounded by new opportunities, new friends, and new possibilities. Her transformation was complete, from invisible waitress to celebrated cultural ambassador in a single evening. But the real victory wasn't personal success. It was proof that recognition, respect, and opportunity could emerge from the most unexpected moments when someone finally chose to really see another person's worth. The golden pin from Giorgio's mother caught the light as Jasmine moved, a symbol of dreams realized and dignity restored. Segment 12. Resolution and Emotional CTA, 750 words target. 6 months later, the ballroom of the Roosevelt Hotel buzzed with anticipation. 200 hospitality executives sat in neat rows, notebooks ready, as Jasmine Carter stepped to the podium. Gone was the black waitress uniform. In its place, She wore a tailored navy blazer with Cultural Hospitality Institute embroidered discreetly on the lapel. Her grandmother's golden pin, now joined by Elena's small poetry charm, caught the morning light. "Good morning," she began in English, then seamlessly switched to Spanish, French, and Mandarin, welcoming attendees in their native languages. "Today, we're going to talk about seeing people." In the third row, an uncomfortable figure shifted in his seat. Robert Wellington had been required to attend by his board of directors following 3 separate discrimination complaints and a devastating viral video that had cost his company millions in lost contracts. His empire had crumbled swiftly. Major hotel chains canceled partnerships. The French businessmen had spread word through European networks. Wellington International's stock price had plummeted 40%. The board had given him one option: complete cultural sensitivity training or face termination. Jasmine noticed him but showed no reaction. Her focus remained on the broader audience. "6 months ago," she continued, "I was invisible. I served food, cleaned tables, and went home exhausted, believing my dreams were dead. But one evening, someone chose to see me, really see me, and everything changed." She gestured to the back of the room where Chef Dubois sat with Inspector Beaumont, both beaming with pride. "Today, I'm Dr. Jasmine Carter. I defended my PhD thesis last month, funded by the Cultural Bridge scholarship program we established for service workers pursuing education." The audience applauded. Wellington stared at his hands. "But this story isn't really about me. It's about your power to transform lives through simple recognition. Every day you interact with people whose talents you can't see because you're looking at their uniforms instead of their potential." She clicked to her first slide, a photo of Marcus in his graduation cap and gown, standing beside their father who looked healthy and proud. "My brother graduated summa cum laude and just started his dream job at the State Department. My father's medical bills are paid. Our family is stable because someone chose to look beyond assumptions." Another click revealed statistics that made the executives lean forward. Companies implementing cultural hospitality programs see 23% higher customer satisfaction, 18% lower employee turnover, and 31% increase in positive online reviews. Recognizing talent isn't just morally right, it's profitable. She paused, letting her eyes sweep across the room. The restaurant industry now has over 300 certified cultural liaisons working across North America. These aren't just translators, they're bridge builders, problem solvers, and dream realizers who are hiding in plain sight. Wellington finally looked up as Jasmine continued. "But here's what I want you to remember when you leave this room. The next time someone serves your coffee, cleans your office, or checks you into your hotel, ask yourself, what don't I know about this person's story? What talents might be hidden behind their name tag?" She reached into her jacket and pulled out a worn photograph, her grandmother as a young woman, clutching a small suitcase and that same French dictionary. "My grandmother used to say, 'Ma petite, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, carrying dreams you can't imagine, and possessing gifts you haven't discovered yet. The question is, will you be the person who finally sees them?'" The room was completely silent. "Your assignment is simple. This week, have one real conversation with someone who serves you. Ask their name. Learn one thing about their background. Express genuine appreciation for their work. You might discover the next cultural ambassador, the next innovative problem solver, or the next person whose hidden talents could transform your business." As she concluded her presentation, something unexpected happened. Wellington stood up slowly, his face etched with genuine remorse. "Dr. Carter," he said, his voice barely audible, "I owe you an apology. And more than that, I owe you gratitude. Your grace taught me something my MBA never could about leadership, about humanity, about seeing people's worth." The room held its breath. Would you consider consulting for Wellington International? We need to rebuild our company culture, and frankly, we need someone who understands transformation. Jasmine smiled gently. Mr. Wellington, everyone deserves a second chance to do better. Send me your proposal. As the executives filed out, energized and inspired, Sarah Lane approached with her camera crew. Dr. Carter, any final words for our viewers? Jasmine looked directly into the camera, her voice warm but powerful. Your current position is not your final destination if someone sees your worth. 6 months later, the ballroom of the Roosevelt Hotel buzzed with anticipation. 200 hospitality executives sat in neat rows, notebooks ready, as Jasmine Carter stepped to the podium. Gone was the black waitress uniform. In its place, she wore a tailored navy blazer with Cultural Hospitality Institute embroidered discreetly on the lapel. Her grandmother's golden pinnow, joined by Elena's small poetry charm, caught the morning light. Good morning, she began in English, then seamlessly switched to Spanish, French, and Mandarin, welcoming attendees in their native languages. Today, we're going to talk about seeing people. In the third row, an uncomfortable figure shifted in his seat. Robert Wellington had been required to attend by his board of directors following 3 separate discrimination complaints and a devastating viral video that had cost his company millions in lost contracts. His empire had crumbled swiftly. Major hotel chains canceled partnerships. The French businessmen had spread word through European networks. Wellington International's stock price had plummeted 40%. The board had given him one option: complete cultural sensitivity training or face termination. Jasmine noticed him but showed no reaction. Her focus remained on the broader audience. 6 months ago, she continued, I was invisible. I served food, cleaned tables, and went home exhausted, believing my dreams were dead. But one evening, someone chose to see me, really see me, and everything changed. She gestured to the back of the room where Chef Dubois sat with Inspector Beaumont, both beaming with pride. Today, I'm Dr. Jasmine Carter. I defended my PhD thesis last month, funded by the Cultural Bridge Scholarship Program we established for service workers pursuing education. The audience applauded. Wellington stared at his hands. But this story isn't really about me. It's about your power to transform lives through simple recognition. Every day, you interact with people whose talents you can't see because you're looking at their uniforms instead of their potential. She clicked to her first slide, a photo of Marcus in his graduation cap and gown, standing beside their father who looked healthy and proud. My brother graduated summa cum laude and just started his dream job at the State Department. My father's medical bills are paid. Our family is stable because someone chose to look beyond assumptions. As she concluded her presentation, something unexpected happened. Wellington stood up slowly, his face etched with genuine remorse. Dr. Carter, he said, his voice barely audible, I owe you an apology. And more than that, I owe you gratitude. Your grace taught me something my MBA never could about leadership, about humanity, about seeing people's worth. The room held its breath. Would you consider consulting for Wellington International? We need to rebuild our company culture, and frankly, we need someone who understands transformation. Jasmine smiled gently. Mr. Wellington, everyone deserves a second chance to do better. Send me your proposal. As the presentation ended, Jasmine moved to her final slide, a simple black screen with white text. Now here's what I want you to do, she said, her voice growing passionate. This isn't just inspiration, this is a call to action. Emotional CTA. When you leave this room today, I challenge you to really see the invisible people around you. The barista making your coffee, ask their name and remember it. The hotel housekeeper restocking your towels, say thank you in their native language if you can. The server at lunch, compliment something specific about their service. Her voice grew stronger, more urgent. Look for the hidden brilliance in your own workplace. Who's been overlooked because of their position, their accent, their background? Who might be carrying dreams bigger than their current circumstances? Be the person who finally sees them. Post your story. Share this message. Use #, see their worth when you recognize someone's hidden talents. Let's make recognizing dignity go viral. Direct CTA. If this story moved you, don't just feel inspired, act inspired. Like and share this video so others can see how recognition changes lives. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when someone finally believes in them. Long-term initiative. Visit Cultural Bridge Scholarship. Org to support service workers pursuing education. Donate, volunteer, or nominate someone whose dreams deserve a chance. Together, we can ensure no talent stays hidden because of circumstances. Final quotable line. Jasmine looked directly into the camera, her grandmother's golden pin catching the light one last time. Your current position is not your final destination if someone sees your worth.